This is the Sahara, not a painting, not a dream of some other planet. This is the Sahara, about 9,000 years ago. Look at the water, a lake so wide you can't see the far shore. Elephants wading in to drink. Green hills rolling to the horizon, soft under a sky heavy with rain. Birds everywhere. Now hold that image, because I'm about to show you the exact same place today. Burnt rock, cracked stone to the edge of the world. No water, no shade, nothing. In the time it takes a great-grandfather to become a great-grandfather a few times over, the largest green world Africa had ever known simply vanished. And the reason it happened, the real reason, is stranger and more unsettling than almost anything you've been told about deserts. But first, you need to see what was actually lost, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Start with the water, because the water is almost impossible to believe. In the very center of the continent, where today there's a shrinking puddle called Lake Chad, there was once an inland sea. Scientists call it Lake Megachad. At its peak, it covered somewhere around 350,000 square kilometers, larger than any of the Great Lakes of North America, possibly the largest freshwater lake the planet has seen in the last 100,000 years. In places, it was 160 meters deep. That's a column of water taller than the Great Pyramid, sitting in the middle of what is now bone-dry sand. We know this because the old shorelines are still there. You can see them from space. Long, curving beach ridges, river deltas, wave-cut cliffs, all carved into the desert by water that hasn't existed for thousands of years. The lake left its outline in the ground like a tide line left in a bath. And it wasn't just Chad. Rivers ran across the Sahara that aren't on any modern map. Radar that can see beneath the sand has traced whole drainage systems, buried valleys, ghost rivers, running out from mountains that today don't see rain in a decade. Then there are the bones, crocodiles, hippos, giraffes. The remains turn up in the middle of Libya, in the middle of Niger, in places where the nearest crocodile today is more than 1,000 kilometers away. Pollen pulled from the bottom of dried lake beds tells the same story. Grasses, shrubs, open savanna stretching across ground that is now pure dune. This is the part I keep turning over in my head. We're not talking about a slightly wetter desert. We're talking about a green continent inside a continent, a whole living world. And the most astonishing thing about that world isn't the animals. It's who was living there. In 2000, a team led by the paleontologist Paul Sereno was hunting dinosaur bones deep in the Tenere, a stretch of Niger so empty the Tuareg call it a desert within a desert. They found bones all right, but not the ones they were looking for. Human skeletons, lying on the surface of an old dune field bleached by the wind. Dozens of them at first, then hundreds. They had stumbled onto the largest Stone Age graveyard ever found in the Sahara, a place now called Gobero. Around 200 burials on the shore of a lake that dried up thousands of years ago. The team used nearly 80 radiocarbon dates to read the site, and what they read was extraordinary. There wasn't one people here, there were two, separated by more than 1,000 years. The first arrived when the lake was full, tall hunter-fishers who speared enormous perch and caught crocodiles. Then the climate turned harsh for a while, and the place was abandoned. Later, a different people came, with cattle, when the rains returned. And one grave stops you cold. A woman laid in the earth with two small children, the three of them turned toward each other, arms reaching. Posed that way, deliberately, by someone who loved them, around 5,300 years ago. That's not a statistic. That's a family. A few hundred kilometers north, on a plateau in southern Algeria called Tassili, Niger, those same green Sahara people left something else behind. On the rock walls, over thousands of years, they painted and carved more than 15,000 images. UNESCO protects it now. It is one of the greatest galleries of prehistoric art anywhere on Earth. And the pictures show you their world directly. Herds of cattle, men hunting with bows, people swimming, giraffes, elephants, hippos in the water. The oldest layer, strange, haunting figures with great round heads, is so old we still argue about what it means. These were not lost primitives clinging to the edge of survival. They herded animals. They buried their dead with care, with ornaments. Some of the earliest cattle-keeping communities in all of Africa lived right here, in what is now the most lifeless place on the continent. They had every reason to believe this world would last forever. They had no idea what was already in motion, millions of kilometers away. So here's the question that should be bothering you. Why was it green at all? Deserts don't usually become gardens by accident. The answer is sitting 93 million miles above your head. The Earth doesn't spin like a perfect top. It wobbles. Slowly, over a cycle that takes around 23,000 years, the direction the axis points traces a big, lazy circle. Astronomers call it precession, and precession quietly changes one thing that matters enormously: where the Earth sits in its orbit during each hemisphere's summer. Around 10,000 years ago, the Wobble had northern hemisphere summer lined up so that North Africa was getting noticeably more sunlight in the summer months than it does today. Not a small nudge. Climate scientists estimate summer radiation over the region was roughly 7% stronger. 7%. Doesn't sound like much, does it? Hold on. That extra summer heat baked the land. Hot land pulls in wet ocean air. That's what a monsoon is. The hotter the land relative to the sea, the harder the monsoon pulls. And the rain belt that today stops far to the south got dragged north, over 1,000 kilometers north, soaking the Sahara. Here's the number that gets me. Modeling work shows that a 7% rise in summer sunlight produces at least a 17% jump in monsoon rainfall, and once you let the oceans respond, possibly up to 50% more rain. A small push on the sunlight, a huge response in the sky. The Sahara didn't turn green by luck. It turned green because the planet was tilted differently, and the rain followed. But the orbit alone doesn't prepare you for what happened at the end, because the ending wasn't gentle. And the orbit, by itself, can't explain why. The wobble is slow and smooth. As it drifted back, the summer sunlight faded gradually, a tiny bit less each century. If rainfall simply tracked the sunlight, the Sahara should have dried out slowly, smoothly, over many thousands of years. It didn't. And the reason is a trap built into the land itself. Think about how the green Sahara fed itself. Plants are dark. Dark ground soaks up sunlight, gets hot, heats the air above it, lifts that air, and lifting air makes rain. Rain grows more plants. The system keeps itself wet. The geophysicist Jules Charny first sketched this idea back in 1975, and it's haunted climate science ever since. Now, run it backwards. As the sunlight slowly weakened, the rains eased off just slightly. A little less rain means a little less vegetation, and bare sand is bright. It's a mirror. It bounces sunlight straight back to space instead of soaking it up. So the ground runs cooler. Cooler ground lifts less air. Less rising air means less rain. Less rain kills more plants. More bare sand. Brighter ground. Even less rain. You see what's happening. The system stops gently sliding downhill and starts falling. Each step makes the next step worse. Scientists call it a feedback loop. I think of it as a door. For thousands of years, it stays open. Then the slow push of the orbit nudges the system past one critical point, and the door doesn't ease shut. It slams. The sediment record off the African coast captures the moment. Peter de Mennecal and his colleagues read it in layers of wind-blown desert dust dropped onto the seafloor, and the message is blunt. The green Sahara didn't fade out. It collapsed. In some areas, the shift from green to desert took only a few centuries. 2 centuries, maybe less in places. Sit with that. A child could be born into a world of grass and lakes, and that same child's grandchildren could be standing on sand. 3 generations, one family's memory, and a green world the size of a continent was gone. Now picture it from inside one of those lives. You're born by a lake. Your grandfather fished these waters. As a child, you watch the shoreline, and it's moving. Every dry season it pulls back a little further than the last, and it doesn't fully return. The fish your family caught for generations are harder to find. The water tastes different. The herders feel it first in the grass. The pastures they always relied on come up thin, then patchy, then not at all. So they push the cattle further to find green, and further. Each year, a longer walk to water that's a little lower than before. Up on the Tassili plateau, the paintings themselves seem to register the change. The lush scenes of the early herders give way, over time, to a drier world, and to new images, horses and chariots, then eventually camels, animals for crossing a hard land rather than living in a soft one. There's one weathered engraving people call the crying cow, a beast with what looks like a tear under its eye. We can't be certain what the artist meant, but it's hard not to read it as a world watching its own water leave. These people didn't vanish. That's the part worth holding on to. They walked. They followed the water that was left, south toward the Sahel, and east toward one river that never failed, the Nile. And here researchers tread carefully, because the timing is suggestive. As the desert emptied, the Nile Valley filled. Some scientists, including Rudolf Cooper and Stefan Kropolin, have proposed that this drying of the Sahara helped funnel people toward the Nile, feeding into the rise of one of history's first great civilizations, Egypt. Not the only cause, not a simple line you can draw, but a quiet, haunting possibility that the death of one world helped seed another. They left, but they didn't leave nothing. They left something that's still out there in the rock, waiting. The art first. 15,000 images at Tassili alone, the single largest rock art archive on the continent, layer on layer of a vanished world. And the oldest layer, those round-headed figures, painted maybe 10,000 years ago, still hasn't given up its meaning. We can stand in front of it, and we genuinely do not fully understand what we're looking at. A message from people we'll never meet, in a language no one can read. But the strangest thing they left behind isn't on the rock, it's under it. When the rains fell on the green Sahara, the water didn't all run off. A great deal of it soaked down, deep into the sandstone, and filled an underground reservoir so vast it almost doesn't sound real. The Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, spreading beneath Egypt, Libya, Sudan, and Chad, across more than 2 million square kilometers. It holds on the order of 150,000 cubic kilometers of water. By one estimate, more than the Nile River discharges in 500 years. And here's what undoes me about it. That water is old. When you pull it up from a Libyan well, much of it fell as rain back in the Ice Age and during the green periods that followed. They call it fossil water. The desert is, quite literally, holding its own past underground. The memory of every storm that made it green, sealed in the rock, where almost nothing has touched it for thousands of years. There's barely any new rain to refill it. We're drinking the green Sahara, one well at a time. So a desert keeps the memory of its living self in 2 places at once, in pictures on the cliffs and in water beneath the sand, which leaves one question no one can quite let go of. Could it happen again? Let's be honest about the timescale first. The orbital wobble that made the Sahara green will come back around, but not for something like 15,000 years. On any human scale, that's not a forecast. That's forever. And yet, there's a twist almost nobody expects. Some climate models suggest that human-driven warming could strengthen the West African monsoon this century, a faint hint of green creeping back into the southern Sahara. And satellites watching the Sahel, the band of dry land along the desert's southern edge, have picked up real greening in recent decades. I want to be careful here. How big it is, how lasting, is genuinely still argued over among scientists. But it is not nothing. Here's the uncomfortable part, though. The thing that ended the Green Sahara wasn't really the orbit. It was the feedback loop, a system that crossed a line and tipped fast on its own. And we now know those tipping points exist all over the planet. Ice sheets, rainforests, ocean currents. Systems that look stable, that look permanent, right up until the moment they aren't. The Sahara is the clearest example we have of how a world can flip. Not slowly, not fairly, not with any warning a person living through it could act on. But I keep coming back to that lake, and those people, and one thought I can't shake. Go back to where we started. The water, the elephants, the green hills. Those people did nothing wrong. They didn't cut down forests. They didn't burn anything out of the ground. They didn't trigger the mechanism that erased their world. The planet simply moved, a slow wobble in the dark, a feedback loop they couldn't see, and their green world went with it. And this is the part I want you to take away. The Sahara we know, the burning, endless sand, is not the default. It is not permanent. It is one position in a cycle so vast that no human civilization has ever lived through a single full turn of it. What we call normal is just the world as it happens to be arranged, right now, for us. Those people stood by their lake and believed it would last forever. So do we.